Hello and welcome to the Bechdel Theatre podcast, the podcast where we talk about gender and representation on stage. I'm Pippa and I'm your host. So this month we have been really busy running some Bechdel Theatre workshops simultaneously at Oval House and the Pleasance Theatre. So thank you so much to those two venues for giving us the space to do so. We ran 4 workshops from theatre making to empowering actors to how to market a feminist show. And speaking of Oval House, this month's episode is a hashtag Bring a Feminist Friend, where we take someone to go see a theatre show who maybe might not normally see it to get their perspective on the show, potentially with a topic that might be of interest to them. This month's episode, we are joined by Florence from the Vagina Museum, which is why we saw a show all about vaginas and vulvas. So we hope you enjoy, and we hope that you're inspired to take people to the theatre who you might not normally take, so that we can break this insular theatre bubble that we all kind of navigate in. Anyway, without further ado, because I don't have Beth today, but she will be out during us at the end, I hope you enjoy. Hello everyone, we are here at the Oval House Theatre post-show after Bella Heasom's brand new play, Rejoicing at Her Wondrous Vulva, the young woman applauded herself. Beth and I are here with Florence Schechter from the infamous Vagina Museum.
Infamous?
Yeah, you're infamous.
What have we done bad?
So Florence, would you like to introduce yourself, say your pronoun and what the Vagina Museum is?
Hi, I'm Florence Schechter. My pronouns are she, her. And the Vagina Museum is that. It's the Vagina Museum. No. So we are a project to build what's going to be the world's first bricks and mortar museum dedicated to the gynecological anatomy. And it all started about 2 years ago when I discovered there is a penis museum in Iceland, which is pretty cool. But there's no sort of vagina, vulva, gynae equivalent anywhere in the world. And I thought that was, can I swear? I thought that was bullshit. So I just decided to make one. Right? And here I am.
And how has that worked so far? Because I know that you've done lots of events and incorporated a lot of like performance and stuff like that into your events. What does the Vagina Museum exist as at the moment? Because you're not currently bricks and mortar yet.
Yes. No, you're absolutely right. So for the past 2 years, we've been pop-ups, pop-up exhibitions, pop-up events, doing different projects, working with different people. And the goal is to have our first premises. So we're currently working towards, we're at a very sort of transitionary period right now. We're working towards getting our first premises, fingers crossed, in Camden Market. So that, if everything goes to plan, we'll open to the public in March 2020. So,
wow, that's so soon.
What will it contain?
Oh, vaginas. No, so it's going to have an exhibition space. It's going to have loads and loads of events, like way more events than your average museum. It's going to have an outreach program. And it's going to have it's just going to be great. We're going to have Sheila gigs on the walls. I don't know if you've seen Sheila gigs. They're like these carvings that are found on medieval churches around Europe, but especially in Britain. And they're of these people who are holding open their vulvas, very exaggeratedly sized vulvas, and the purpose of this is to ward off evil spirits, and I think they're just beautiful because they're just one of the few examples we have of vulvas being used in society as a positive thing. So I want to have those up all over the walls and stuff. It's going to be great.
Oh my god,
Gorgeous.
amazing.
I actually used to have in my flat the Great Wall of Vagina. I went to see the Great Wall of Vagina when it was being exhibited somewhere in central London, and I brought along loads of people that I worked with of all different genders. We all went for an explore of the Great Wall of Vagina, and I brought the set of 10 postcards, and I had them stuck up on the entrance to my flat, so whenever my very old male landlord came round, he would have to just take a second to absorb the Great Wall of Vagina before he
just to be clear to any listeners who don't know, the Great Wall of Vagina is a piece of art that was made by an artist called J.B. McCartney, and it's basically 400 vulval casts all arranged in this huge row, and he made it because he learnt that the labiaplasties have increased on the NHS by 500% in the past 10 years. This is huge, and the Royal College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists came to the conclusion the reason for this is because of the skewed representations, the narrow representations of vulvas in our popular culture.
Porn.
Yeah. So he made it. It's amazing. It's like all different shapes, different sizes, different ages.
We
people
know
with
one of the
piercings, people who
vaginas.
transitioned. Oh, do you know one
One
of
of
them?
the vaginas is
Do
a
we?
previous podcast guest.
Wait, who is
Yes.
it?
Naomi Paxton, of course.
Oh, is it?
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, and also Dominique was nearly part of it, but then they had to cancel because they had something else on that day. And I was like, when I had the Great Wall of Vagina on our living room wall, Dominique was like, I was so nearly one of those vaginas.
I remember the Great Wall of Vagina when it was in Brighton, because when I was about 16 and like going out clubbing, somehow I would always stumble across it, and it used to be like in the window of this like, so I don't know what it was, like as an
studio.
exhibition.
The artist is based in Brighton.
Right, okay, so like I used to go out, and I just remember like it'd always be one of the, like, somehow it would always happen, I would lose my friends and I'd be going through the back lanes and I would stumble across this neon wall of vaginas, and none of my friends believed me because I could never find my way back there, and I'd always be like, guys, we've got to go find the wall of vagina, like it would be like my mission at the end of the night, like I have to show you it, and like no one believed me because I could never find it again, and it was always this like lone journey that I had on my own.
I think that's quite symbolic.
Yeah, I think it was a very like
mirage.
self-discovery kind of time, you know.
Yeah, just like presents it when you need it, and when you're boozed up, so your like defenses are lowered.
Yeah, it was amazing. Well, I got to take that time to just like stare at all these vulvas and be like, you know, my 16 like inebriated self, like, whoa.
Look at the rain.
Yeah.
I wish I had that when I was 16.
I know, it's
That'd
such a
have been
treat,
great.
really. So we are here, obviously, to talk about Bella Heason's show, which I will say the title again, Rejoicing at Her Wondrous Vulva, the young woman applauded herself. And we have just not only seen the show, which is in 2 acts. The first act is 90 minutes theatre performance, and the second act is a conversation with the makers and invited audience members to discuss the themes.
But they also have a garden in the entrance of Oval House, which is like a little collection of trees where people can write the things that they were, the trees that were planted about sexuality in their lives. So the ideas that they learned about sexuality, about vaginas and vulvas, and hang the little their ideas on the plants. So as you come into Oval House, you're like, lovely trees, and then you notice that the things hanging from the trees are all people's received ideas about sex and sexuality, and some of them are good, some of them are slightly dodgy, and I did a little Instagram story of them, so you can check out some of them, but you should come and see the show so you can read some of the things that people have written that the show brought up from them. And we're also eating a vulva-shaped biscuit that was on sale at the box office as well. So it's like they've taken over the whole building and sort of themed all of what's going on and they serve sex on the beach cocktails. It's
I mean, I'm surprised there isn't any cunting. I'm just saying it out there.
maybe
Yes.
we should
Miss the
just
mark.
send them some cunting to complete the image of the show.
We do cunting as part of the Vagina Museum workshops, and I have a collection of all the different things, and it's one of my favourite things that Vagina Museum has ever made.
Oh,
Lovely.
cool.
So, Florence, what did you think of the show?
Oh, what a question!
Big question.
I thought it was great, actually. Like, I think it was extremely relatable. As a person who's been through a lot of what they were talking about, I saw the kind of feelings they were having at every stage of their life, because it kind of goes through like when they're just like about to go through puberty, or puberty is just starting, to kind of getting a bit later on in adolescence, and all the like different messages you get at different points, and when they're kind of like as an adult. I was like, I feel every single part of that. There were like a few things that were not super great, but I think overall it was a super emotive show, and I like it touched something very deep inside of me.
Did you come with expectations about what you might be going to see on stage?
No.
Before you came in? No? You
No,
were just like,
just go with the flow.
whatever. So it's a 2-woman show.
Sarah was so good. She is so charming, and she so embodies like that whole like, I really like her. I also really fancy her.
Her face is just lights up, doesn't it?
Everything,
It's
her
gorgeous.
voice, her body, the way she moves, she's so natural at it.
She's very like
Clitoral?
I was going to say, like, there's like this very kind of like natural essence to her performance. But then also I noticed that when we got to see her talk afterwards in the kind of like post-show chats, I'm like, oh, you're just like that as a person, and that's why you were right for that role.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah, she came up to us before the show, and she came and she shook our hands, and as she took our hand, she like very deep and meaningfully like looked into your eyes and was like, hello, it's so nice to meet you. And just like, I've never had a handshake be so intimate.
One thing also about the show that runs through it is that the two performers play both the brain and the clitoris, and they interact and argue with each other and try to like, form a relationship.
Of one person, but one person is sort of divided. I really loved the moments where they fought against each other. I thought that was a really good way of kind of showing something that is hard to express in words, which is something that I've seen done more and more on stage. I don't know if it's that we get to see a lot more work that is exploring these feminist issues that feel like, oh God, maybe I can't express this with the language of the patriarchy, and I just need to like use my body and use sound to express it. But yeah, the bits where they fought, and then the bits where they just very gently touched each other's bodies.
It was a very physical show. Yeah, there was like a lot of touching and
Yes.
I will say as a content warning for anyone who goes to watch it that there's a lot of like equation with vulvas to womanhood and not much breadth for there existing anything outside
And
of
also
that.
sexuality as well.
So this is the thing that I was like, before we were recording, I was like hinting that I have a thing to say about this. So I totally understand the bioessentialism when we're talking about the tropes, because a lot of the show is, these are the messages that I received when I was a child or when I was growing up in society. So I totally understand, because the messages you receive are very cisnormative. I get that. I think it's very interesting because the basis for the title of the show, Rejoicing at Her Wondrous Vulva, the young woman applauded herself, is from a story about Inanna, who is a ancient goddess of Sumeria, of Mesopotamia, of Arcadia, of Babylon. She's like this very ancient goddess, and they talk and they kind of talk about this goddess in the show, which is why it's called that. The reason their cisnormativity was so interesting is because the cult of Inanna had many gender non-conforming priests. So they had, in many different of the cultures, because Inanna, also called Ishtar, was maybe you've heard, you're like, Ishtar, Inanna or Ishtar was worshipped from about 4000 BCE to about 500 CE mostly, and actually you can see evidence of her worship until about 1700, like the 18th century. And way back when, her priests, many of her priests were sort of assigned male at birth, but would dress as women. They would use the female dialect. They would kind of essentially act as women. They would engage with sex with men, and they would be part of the priests involved in the worship. So they were like completely gender non-conforming. Like her whole history is steeped in a completely different gender system to the one we have nowadays. So the fact that they were being very cisnormative in the show,
it's very a post-colonial view of sexuality. And
absolutely, because she comes from Middle East, right?
Can we identify the moments in the show where we felt that the cisnormativity was not the messages of the patriarchy that we all learn, but was actually being reinforced?
Yeah.
I think there was one moment near the beginning where Bella mentioned when a female woman looks down, she sees, I could actually know the word, like pubis mound or something.
Yeah, it was
the
the
mons
introduction
pubis.
of the
Mons pubis.
clitoris.
Yeah.
And she said, when a female human looks down, she sees.
Yeah.
Rather than, what they could have said was, when somebody with a vulva looks down, they see.
Yeah.
Yeah, because like, even the bits where it was like very personal, so there was certain bits where the clitoris would come to life and get very angry and be like, I am a woman and you must respect me. Yeah, I'm a woman and I have a clitoris. So I totally get when she's saying that from a personal perspective, because obviously the show is partly autobiographical. These things always are. But in the scientific explanation, I feel like they could have been much more gender neutral.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting, and we see this a lot with shows where you're talking about your experiences and what your experiences mean to you. Like, my experiences of being a woman can mean having a vagina, but I realise that it's not for everyone. Figuring out a way to make something like autobiographical and inclusive of people who don't relate with your experience.
And I felt like that scientific explanation would have been the moment, the sort of opportunity that felt a bit missed.
Yeah.
Especially considering you're saying like how, you don't need to have had that experience to understand the show and relate to the show. In the post-show discussion, somebody was saying how we should take the show to schools so that young girls should learn about these things. And then someone interrupted and was like, boys as well. And so you immediately have proof. Yes, boys absolutely need to learn about this. So why not non-binary people and gender non-conforming people should also learn about this?
Yeah, exactly. Like the idea that boys and girls are the only people in the world is not a true thing.
Which I think if the show had more conversation and more references to people who exist outside the binary, the post-show would have included that more.
It wasn't a post-show, it was the second half.
The second act.
We shouldn't advertise it as a post-show. No. It was the second act of the show, so it wasn't a thing that was special for the performance that we saw. It is necessarily included in the show, and I think part of the reason they've done that is because they obviously have the intention of wanting to include conversation.
I really
and
recommend staying for anyone who comes to see the show. Really stay, because it's like really, they like changed the space. I felt like I was in a different room just because they came through a different entrance, and they put like all this mood lighting out with like cushions. Like, I did feel well looked after in the space, and it was really nice hearing people's opinions and stuff.
And then it did bring in a lot of different voices into the room, and there were people who brought up women loving women and having sex with other women, and how that can change your experience or not of your own genitalia, and your experiences of actually having sex. There was an older person in the room who that was just talked about how I think the phrase was, I can't even say the word. I can't believe you got up and said all this stuff. I can't even say the word period. And then everyone just burst out into applause because someone was like, you just did. And they were saying, like, I just really wanted to tell everyone that I really love Jilly Cooper books. And my favourite Jilly Cooper book, and started talking about experiences of that. So it was nice to have that opportunity for like different voices
for
in the
people
room. And then there was somebody else talking about being grown up, having been grown up with an Asian mother teaching things that were maybe culturally different from what other people in the room might have experienced. And it was, so that was an opportunity to...
we love a good chat.
Love
to
a
talk
chat.
about themes, obviously.
Yeah. I was very inspired by, I thought next time we do a Bechdel Theatre post-show, we should bring blankets.
Yes.
And get everyone sitting on cushions.
Oh, yeah, make it as cosy as possible.
Yeah.
I'm
annoyingly, they're often in chairs and...
drawing the line at yoni steaming.
I'm not going to ask people to do a yoni steam.
Well, I went into the room and I was like, what are they going to do? Like, there was so many blankets and cushions. I was like, are we going to get our badges out and like do a bit of...
Oh no, vagina gazing.
I've heard of this.
Yeah.
Have you done it?
No, but I've had some artists come to me and be like, I would like to host, do vagina gazing at a museum. So it's something I'm very interested in doing. It's going to be interesting.
Yeah.
It's very interesting because I have some small things and just the legalities of it, because the people who came to me to ask to do it are from Germany, where the law's completely different. And because sex work is technically illegal in the UK, but having brothels is not.
So
soliciting is fine. You can't do it on the street unless you're in the managed areas. So if we did vagina gazing, maybe it would have to be free. I don't know. These are legal questions I need to ask someone.
Would that count as a sexual activity, or is it a therapy?
Well, I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't.
It's not sex activity when you get a smear test, is it?
No.
Yeah. I think it's about...
Yeah, but you also don't charge for a smear test.
You might if you're going to a private clinic.
Yeah, good point.
Yeah, but you can argue... I mean, I hate being fucking devil's advocate, but in terms of, like, what this would mean for you, you could argue, like, a medical cause for smear tests. Are these people going to see, like, the holistic...
the medical cause...
they're probably... The people who make these laws probably aren't going to see it the way that we would see, like... the
people who make these laws. We'll battle it out in the courts.
Do it.
We will.
Is there anything else that people felt. Yeah, go ahead.
I only want to give some really interesting background knowledge that I found out while doing some like revision to do this podcast, which absolutely blew my fucking mind. Okay, so I was reading up stories about Inanna. There's loads and loads of stories. The most famous one is Gilgamesh, the Epic of Gilgamesh, which is this like super ancient story, but that's not actually the one that blew my mind. So the one that did was a story about how, so all of these are like myths, you know, like you've got myths that Aphrodite have and myths of Zeus and whatever. So there's a myth about Inanna where she was kind of a teenager, she was a young girl, and she wanted to know what sex was, because there are all these stories from like different stages of her life, and you can see how she grows and develops. And she wanted to know what sex was. She was her brother, and her brother is like, "Fine, I'll show you what sex is." Not in that way, but although, yeah, I know. Oh my god, you should hear the like ancient Greek myths of how the world was started. It's super
But I'm like,
gross.
could have also been that. So I was like,
Yeah,
I mean,
it totally could have.
Yeah.
Well, so anyway, so her brother takes her down to the underworld where there is the tree of knowledge, and she eats from the tree and understands what sex is. And this story is most probably the origin of Adam and Eve and the tree of
Adam
knowledge.
and Eve. And I've just made the connection between Bella's Garden of Sexuality in the
Eden.
foyer, where everyone's hung up the ideas about what sex was that they have on the tree. I mean,
there's a lot of Easter eggs in there.
Yeah, there
Well,
are. For those who know their ancient history, like,
I know.
if you do your research.
Because I grew up in a sort of very closed religious community.
Really?
You know, so I'm Jewish, and like everyone I knew was Jewish. I went to Jewish school, you know, everything Jewish, and this was all taught as like, yeah, this is what happened. And now I'm learning like, oh, this is actually just the same stories that a completely different culture had 6,000 years ago, whereas yours were 4,000 years ago. And it's like, what is even real anymore? And also to learn that the tree of knowledge is actually the tree of sex makes so much sense. Come on. Because like to biblically know, right? Means sex. So the tree of knowledge, of course, is about sex. Ugh.
Wow.
And fruit is so sexual. And how okay, so Eve eats from it first and she tempts Adam. Right? So you might think this is like, if we're talking about sex, it's the opposite nowadays, because the nowadays narrative is that men are the super horny ones and women must be chaste and aren't sexual at all. Well, if you actually go back before kind of a few hundred years ago, it was completely the opposite. So in medieval times, women were the sexual horny beasts who were constantly trying to like...
I feel like post-Victorian, it's like they like repressed that. And
Well, actually the Victorians
Is it
were
not
super sexual.
But like
It's
it was
a bit of a myth.
repressed though, wasn't it? Though?
I mean, in the public sphere, which is a
Yeah.
bit different to the
But was
private
that
sphere.
bred because there was, I mean, this is how much I don't know about history, but was that bred because there was like harsher, like I thought like the country was all in mourning because of Victoria and stuff, so like a lot of shit was like underground. And is it that they were actually so sexy because there was more repression, maybe? I don't know.
It's hard to say because the Victorian times saw a huge societal change because of the Industrial Revolution, where we went from like small cities, lots of agriculture, and the Industrial Revolution meant that there were these floods of people from rural areas crowding cities, and societal structure completely changed. So it's very difficult to say whether it's because of one thing or another. Something I do know is Queen Victoria herself was super horny. She was an absolute horn dog.
And that's why she was so sad when her husband.
Yeah, totally.
She was like,
Exactly.
where's all the
Mourning
sex
the loss of her
gone?
sex life.
They had like 9 children for a reason.
It feels like what they might have been doing is something which came up in the second half of the show, the conversation part, which is we talked about, people talked about how there is often a line drawn between being just sexy enough, but not too sexy. And it made me think about the Victorian, like, ankles and the line between being your ankles can be very sexy, but like, oh, you don't want to take off too much, and like that borderline between, oh, you're like, oh, this kind of woman can be sexy or this kind of woman can't be sexy, and that idea that line gets continually enforced from within your own mind. Then once you set your own personal boundary about like what's too sexy and what's not sexy enough,
And then it's all cultural and contextual as well as in like
Yeah, totally, because different body parts are going to be completely differently sexualized and different, you know. So like, for example, you know, I went on holiday to the Far East, and every time I would wear shorts, the male attention was absolutely horrendous. It was really, really difficult. But I would wear shorts in the West and nobody would care. But then on the other hand, you know, you can go topless in some parts of the world and they're like, what the fuck, you know, like they're tools for feeding babies. Why would I ever care about them? But you go topless in the West and everyone has a like meltdown.
And you really can't ignore the fact that all of these things, like the clothes that you wear, the movements that you do with your body, have cultural connotations. There was someone in the conversation who said, in an ideal world, these lines just wouldn't exist.
And it was like, of course a man would say that.
Yeah. Oh my God, that guy was so annoying.
We don't live in like a bubble outside of culture and gendered expectations and, you know,
Yeah,
like...
well, so what he was doing was, what I found really irritating, was he was kind of saying like the patriarchy was women's fault, because he was saying like, well, as soon as you place these boundaries on yourself, aren't you making that line?
Liberate yourselves, women.
Yeah, like it's your fault the patriarchy exists because you're not fighting back hard enough.
What that person was doing was positioning themselves, who we're assuming was a man. He very much presented as a cisgender opinion man. Yeah. And he was positioning himself as the neutral outsider. Yeah. Outside of the world of the play, which was about people with vulvas and that line of sexuality, and saying, well, if you didn't impose that line, if we all could just get over it. And it was like, well, actually you probably have a line inside you too. You just haven't taken the time to think about gender and sexuality a lot because it's not something that sort of oppresses you on a daily basis.
But that is something that actually, so it is an interesting sparking point for something that I was thinking about, because some of the people in the second act were talking about how do you know when you're doing something that does conform to the patriarchy? For example, like you can wear high heels if you want to, as long as it's a thing that you want to do and you're not doing it to societal expectations. And so she asked, how do you know? Are you doing the thing because you want to, or are you doing it because the patriarchy is forcing you? And people were discussing this concept. And because a lot of the show did talk about how we enforce the patriarchy on ourselves. But I feel like we can't ever have that conversation without acknowledging that conversation must exist alongside the conversation that we must change society. Yes, we must change ourselves. Yes, we must be conscious of our own actions, but we cannot do that without commenting on the fact, you know, of like the laws that we have in place and you know, like the societal standards we have in place and the media that we have. Like, I feel like those conversations have to be had alongside each other.
Yeah, I felt like it was a bit like the idea that we enforce it on ourselves quite hard, because I feel like it's like I've absorbed this and internalized this. This isn't something I actively do to myself. Like, it's not a choice.
You didn't make it.
But it's like a freedom and a liberty and a choice that I have to like be able to like work against it and do things that aren't considered, you know, attractive in the eyes of patriarchy or like whatever. Yeah, I think you're right.
Because I feel like the thing that I always have trouble with is people who say like, oh, but if you do want to shave your armpits, then you become a tool of the patriarchy. It denies women agency. It's like, oh, you can't make choices because you have absorbed the patriarchy. Therefore, because I, who haven't absorbed the patriarchy, can tell you what you can do to fight it. And it's like, oh, once again, someone is telling what a woman should and shouldn't do.
That, isn't it?
Yeah, and to bring it back to this sort of issue around cis-normativity that's then used as something to attack trans women with is like, oh, but you're conforming to blah, blah, blah. And it's like, well, these are ideas that exist. These are things that exist within us because of what the history that we have and the society that we grew up in and the, you know, generations and generations of ways that we've learned to express ourselves and ways that we want to express ourselves and desires that exist. Just because it is part of something, a bigger picture, it doesn't mean it's not authentic or natural, you know, to want to put makeup on or to want to wear a dress.
I did like the conversation that was like, do you think that there was never like sexuality or lust before we had lingerie and all that kind of stuff? I really like that like framing of it, which I thought was nice.
That was cool. Although, interestingly, makeup has existed for thousands of years.
Exactly.
It is one of the
there's other stuff that existed, like just because there wasn't lingerie.
But like plenty of, for example, like
perfume.
female animals like have sex without ever having any of these trappings whatsoever.
Yeah.
You know.
I think there was really something, I don't know if you felt this as well, about that I felt really came up for me when talking about like the embracing of the vulva and things like masturbation and like what your friends would say. And like it really reminded me of like being a teenager and hearing those kinds of comments about like the vagina and the vulva. And I had a lot of friends who like were like really against masturbation for themselves, like didn't, you know, have a go at anyone who was doing it, but would say like problematic stuff about it and kind of had this like opinion that like, oh no, like that's for a guy, like that's not for me to use, like, and learned about their bodies primarily through their relationships with other people and with other guys, and like I remember feeling like, as someone who's attracted to women and only attracted to women, like I felt like I internalized a lot of my like internalized homophobia and femphobia was by my friends rejecting the idea of the vulva and being like, oh well, I shouldn't be one of those people that like vulvas because that's supposed to be what guys do, and like if my friends don't even like their own, then like, oh, I'm really disgusting for liking other people's, and like I can't like my own, and like it just like I'd never even really properly thought about that, but that's what like it made me think of in those conversations. Vag phobia.
But did they ever talk about how much they loved penis?
I feel like my friends talk about that now, almost in a jokey way. Like I often make the joke like, she's out for the D. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I make that joke quite a lot. I've never said she's out for the vag in the same way.
That's interesting.
I don't know.
The idea of getting
different to this.
Yeah.
My school, we there was a lot of talk about going for a wank between girls, and there was a lot of talk about vag, but maybe this is a conversation for that's self-discovery moment, because it was in my school it was very like almost sort of in a way to like repeat the behaviours of the boys, to sort of like be like, yeah, we're just like them, yeah, look, do you know what I mean?
I think but interestingly, I went to an all-girls school, so we didn't have that model to like,
whereas we were
aim for.
I feel like I definitely see, when looking back at myself as a teenager, like aping the behaviour of like the lads, of being like, oh, I'm just so horny, I've got to go and have a wank. It's just terrible, isn't it?
I have a friend who told me how she got to about 18 before she realised that like you could masturbate with a vulva. Like she just didn't realise it, and then a friend mentioned it in a conversation, and then suddenly it clicked, and she was like, oh my god, you can masturbate with a penis. Of course you can masturbate. She just like never clicked that was a thing you could do.
Yeah.
Because the universal gesture for it is
very
penis-centric.
And even calling it like having a wank, it's like I'm not actually like wanking anything. And even though I call it,
what is the word? What does that word mean?
That is a story I did. Not a story. This is a conversation
etymology
I had.
of wank.
Yeah, can a person with a vulva wank? Was wanking a penis-orientated activity? This is a conversation I had a lot as a teenager.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Well, I was a strange teenager. I'll tell you a story about masturbating. So I went to a Jewish school.
Yeah.
And it was like mixed sex. And I remember we had Jewish studies lessons, and the rabbi was telling us about how masturbation is this really bad thing and you shouldn't do it because it's the wastage of seed, right? And then I was so upset to learn in biology class that you like recycle sperm, and if you don't use it, it just dies anyway. So it's like you might as well wank if you want to.
Wait,
anyway,
you recycle sperm?
Yeah, so sperm only lives in testes for like a little bit, and then it will get recycled into new sperm.
What do you mean recycled? Like rebirth?
No, so like the body will break it down into its component molecules and then reform the cells.
From the same thing?
Yeah, because if the cells are too old, they don't work well.
I never knew that.
Yeah, in the same, like everything, like your whole body.
Like how skin cells just replicate.
Yes, skin cells will shed off and you'll get new skin cells. Your blood cells, they recycle every 180 days.
That's why, like, sperm isn't like teeth. Like, you only get one set of sperm.
And then you wank 10 times and then you're done.
You've run out of sperm.
That's why I thought sperm count count was like, I thought it meant because like
No.
you can only
Sperm
produce-
count is how many sperm are in your semen. So like
Yeah.
if you've got a big dollop of semen, how many sperms are in that is your sperm
Yeah.
count. Not how many sperm are left in your balls forever.
But surely they would relate to each other.
No,
It's not
just
like- it's not like eggs.
It's about how fast and well your body's producing sperm or semen. It's not about how much you can store up.
You know what? I read a really interesting article once that was about masculinity, capitalism, competition, and the journey of the sperm, and about how it's not actually a race. Something about like there was a new study about like the journey of the sperm
like
and
the
how
sperm
like,
will help each other.
and no, but it was something about like our desire to see the journey of like one man who wins, and that how like we impose that onto the journey of like good sperm, and that like there's one that wins the race, and that helps feed the idea of masculinity in men.
It is true. The like study of human reproduction is really patriarchal, and scientists really hate to admit it. Yeah, because eggs are often seen as this very like passive thing that sperms penetrate when it's actually really not the case. So the story I was going to say is that I was in Jewish studies class, and they talk about how masturbation is really bad because sperm will be wasted, and that's a wastage of life. I put up my hand and I was like, Rabbi, what about female masturbation? And you could see like everyone in the class was like,
Yeah.
I can't believe she asked that. And I remember the rabbi so clearly, I can see it in my head right now. He stopped and he looked at me and he stumbled over some words and he was like, oh, it's inappropriate sexual feelings, and then just moved on. Because like you could clearly see he was like, I have never even thought about that question. I can't believe a student who is like 14 years old is asking me that question. Like, I have never been told the answer to this question. He was like, I have no idea what's going on. Because he never considered that female masturbation was even a thing that could happen.
Which was reflected in the show, that thing of, what is this thing that I'm doing?
Yeah.
Where she was like, it's dirty, we mustn't do it. We'll go in the shower. Nothing dirty could possibly happen in the shower because it's a very clean thing. I wanted to ask something about the second part of the show, so that you have an interval, then we have this conversation. And at the beginning of the conversation, Bella said, we're trying to listen positively instead of debate each other.
Did she say that?
She did. I wrote it
yeah.
down because I was writing down little quotes.
And she-
things.
She
When she
said
was
to
saying
be-
like don't be judgmental and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Be kind, she said, I remember.
That created a certain kind of warm atmosphere. How did we feel about that?
I think it was really nice, but I also feel like everyone who went to see the show was already on the same page. Like, I feel there was that one older lady who was like, oh, I'm so proud of all of you for being so confident. And, you know, it must have been really nice for her. But, like, I feel like 95% of the audience were all on the same page. And we were just sharing in our collective woes and joys. And we were all just kind of... There wasn't a debate. And I feel like there never was going to be a debate.
Yeah, it didn't feel like there was a necessity to say this isn't a debate. But it felt like...
I don't like someone telling me not to debate people.
Exactly, especially considering the sort of
love you, Bella.
perspective that the show was coming from in terms of from a presumably heterosexual cisnormative background.
It was really interesting because you say heterosexual, and
Heteronormative.
It is
I
no,
think.
but it's
Heteronormative,
so it absolutely is heteronormative in that the main character only ever talks about having sex with men, but the two main characters who are female often simulate sex with each other and even get naked with each other. So I thought that was very interesting. Anyway, continue.
It was interesting, but I never read that as... Interestingly, I read them as like supposed to be the same person, and they're symbolic rather than two characters. That like I felt like I shed any other layer there.
I just felt quite pressured to be like, praise you. What a wonderful transformative experience.
Yeah, and I felt like I would love to create something and have it spark
Spark a debate.
I think.
But as long as it was, I guess there is the idea that within the space of the second half of the show, which was about 45 minutes, maybe even less, with so many voices in the room, I don't know if the performers are equipped to sort of play Dimbleby in managing a debate. Do you know what I mean? Like chairing, like deciding who gets to say how much.
I mean, it depends also on who's there that day, because today people were quite shy. It was quite difficult to
It didn't
people
get
to say
very like into the grittiness. I don't know. I feel like the fact that we didn't talk about cisgender privilege and that kind of stuff that was like was very present in the show by not being present in the show.
It was glaring.
Like it was in a way quite violent, I think. To not feel like there was a space afterwards to explore those things.
Which surprises me slightly because the director, Donica, directed Rotterdam, which was a play that created a lot of space for talking about, for having discussions and post-show celebrations and industry reflection on trans representation.
Mm. Yeah, that is really interesting, actually.
I hadn't thought of that until...
Yeah,
because if you feel like if you've done it well once, why haven't you done it? Why is it selective?
Yeah. And that, I mean, Rotterdam did not do it perfectly because they cast somebody who doesn't identify as a trans man, and then they had this whole sort of thing with the show where they held lots of space for talking about that and calling themselves out, and that they're doing a tour, and the tour contains 2 trans out of 3 cast members, and it seems like they've been on a journey. Like, it's a different show, but the Rotterdam team, it seems like they've been on a journey from being, we're cisgender people who are interested in telling this story, how do we go about this, to like, actually we should try and hand over the platform and forefront the voices whose story it actually belongs to. And it feels like they went through a process with that. And so I know Donica's not the writer of this show and isn't a trans person, as far as I know. But it feels like it felt especially jarring to me now when I suddenly had that thought that I was like, maybe they just needed to get someone on to give them feedback on that. And then I was like, but surely they have someone on the team who's been involved in a show and had that feedback before, previously on a show.
Might be interesting to ask them, I don't know.
Yeah.
We will.
You mentioned the word violent as well, and I think there is definitely another thing that has been very glaring for me, is that there's essentially a rape scene in it. And I found watching that was really difficult, and I really wish I had been warned about that, because it was really, really hard to watch. And it wasn't a rape scene in the most traditional sense. It was so basically what happened was the main character forced her clitoris to engage in sex, which is something I totally get. Like, I've definitely done that, where I'm like, my body is not feeling like sex ready, but I want to have sex rationally, so I'm going to force my body to do that. But the way it was presented was one woman forcing another woman to have sex, and she's like holding her down, and she's got her hand over her mouth, and it's really horrible to watch. And I genuinely might email them and be like, you need to warn people about that, because I don't want, someone to then have a panic attack in your show.
Yeah, because it's very much presented as sort of a show that's about discovering your vagina and discovering your sexuality, and it's not necessarily something that you would think, this is going to have, issues around consent in it, because if it's about discovery of your own body, you might think that that's okay because it's not
from the branding
sexual
of it.
Relationship with another person.
Like you look at the poster and it's very like hippy dippy, love your body.
And to be fair, that is the place they end up at. That's part of that, and that is what she deals with as part of her journey. But it would be nice to have let me see if they put anything on the flyer,
because there wasn't anything in the
program
on the website,
because I would have noticed that.
There wasn't any signs up anywhere saying, hey, talk to us if you want to find out about trigger warnings.
It says the hidden battle between brain and clitoris.
Something Sophie Hagen did really well when I went to see her show in Edinburgh a couple of years ago was she just put the lights up, and she was like, hey, here are the trigger warnings for the show, said them, put the lights down, and then the show started. And I feel like, especially with the conversational nature of the show that they have written, they could have done that quite easily.
And I thought that as well, with they had this framework of the show where they would have all this conversation, the conversational nature of it, that I thought there was like then so room to be inclusive of wider experiences. It's not like it was just a play of like these characters and they kind of never talk outside themselves. I felt like the form would have lended itself to having those kinds of conversations in it.
There's definitely room for that.
The very nature of the show is about societal expectations. So because it's not a show that's only about personal experience. You know, like people have said these things about like Girls, for example, where like Girls, it's like very white, very cis, and at the end of the day, like it's Lena Dunham's experience, so you can kind of get that she lives a very white experience. But this whole show is about society as a whole, and so they absolutely could have included that.
With that all being said, we highly recommend you go see it because there's so much in it. There's so much in it, and
just be prepared.
Yeah, just some things to keep in mind.
Yeah. Beth, what's your feminist fave this month?
My feminist fave this month is Lizzo.
Oh yes.
Lizzo's new album, Cause I Love You. It's amazing in terms of body positivity, self-love, like just freaking power. It's one of those where you can just put the album on and you're sitting on like a drab tube surrounded by people in suits and you just hear her voice be like, cause I love, and you're just like, oh my God, I feel good about everything in the world. She's amazing.
That's a great one.
That's it.
I love Lizzo. I
Lizzo.
need to listen to more of her album. I haven't listened to the whole
I've
thing
been
yet.
listening to her album every day since it came out. I'm obsessed. Completely obsessed.
Oh my God. Okay. So my feminist faves this month is, I feel like I've done a few books recently, but the one I'm currently reading is called Fierce Femmes and Notorious Liars, a dangerous trans girl's confabulous memoir by Kai Cheng Tom. And it is this, first of all, it's got a beautiful cover, and it is, I can read it. At once a love letter and challenge to the traditional transgender memoir, Fierce Femmes and Notorious Lies is a playful, surrealist dance through queer coming of age. And it is exactly that. And it's this story of, it's like really like fantastical, and there's like people who are like crocodiles, and like she lives in like the Street of Miracles, but it's like very obviously like very urban, like she moves to a city, and you can kind of really picture it being like a big capital city like London or New York. And it's about her like finding her community and the shit that goes on there. It's just like, I just love it so much, and each chapter is only like a couple pages long and tells like a different story, and like they're like, one of them's called like How to Kill a Man with Your Bare Hands, and
it looks
like
beautiful.
It's just so beautiful. Ghost friend, or the only person who can make me come. Yeah, she has this ghost in her life who is just like a character who makes her come. Like it's just like a really beautiful book. I highly recommend it. You can get it from Gaze the Word.
You've got a Gaze the Word bookmark in there.
Yeah, because they give you one with every book you buy. So I've got like a collection of them. Yeah.
Gaze the Word, another feminist fave.
Yeah. Have you got a feminist fave?
Yeah, well, there you go. I was really struggling to think of one because there's so many feminist faves in my life. But since we're talking about books, go to Second Shelf. This is a feminist bookshop. It's a second-hand bookshop, antiquarian bookshop that's opened in the West End. And they're lovely, and they're called The Second Shelf, and I'm sure you can understand the title of it. And they've only just opened, so you should really go and like support them. They're not like some establishment. Like Gaze the Word is amazing, but has been going for a while. So go to Second Shelf.
Whereabouts in the West End is it?
It's like off this tiny little street. I'll show you on a map. Google it.
Send us the link. We'll link it to all our listeners. So.
Yeah.
And where can we find the Vagina Museum updates? Or
Vagina Museum, you can find at vaginamuseum.co.uk, on Twitter and Instagram, we're vagina_museum, on Facebook, unfortunately, we are facebook.com/vmuseum, because Facebook was like, vagina's a naughty word.
Oh, God.
I know, but the absolute hypocrisy of it is
it's
that
a medical term.
Yeah, I know, right? But our page title is Vagina Museum. So like the name of the page, so if you were to do like @ and then like try and tag someone, if you type in Vagina Museum, it will come up with us. But the URL, just specifically the URL, cannot be Vagina Museum. Anyway, but that's where you can find us. We've got like a mailing list, and hopefully in March you can come and actually visit us in person.
So exciting.
Can't wait. Yeah, everyone with vaginas or who has anything to do with a vagina should check it out.
So basically every person in the whole
Everyone
world.
who's ever been born.
Yeah.
Cool. Thanks very much.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for coming to the theatre with us.
Yes.
thank you for giving me lots of free booze.
Hello, it's Beth here with a few recommendations of theatre that we think you should check out in the month of June. First up, we have Funeral Flowers by the amazing Emma Dennis-Edwards. This did really well at the Bunker, and you've got another chance to see it at the Bernie Grant Arts Centre from May 29th till June the 1st. So take that chance if you haven't seen it already. It's amazing. Speaking of amazing, Salt is at the Royal Court until June the 1st. We've already recommended this one as well, so it's a reminder, do not miss your chance to see Salt. A little teaser, we also recorded an interview the other day with Selena Thompson, the creator of Salt, and Rochelle Rose, the performer, and it was just such a huge privilege to hear them talk about the show, having seen it both at Edinburgh where Selena was performing it and currently at the Royal Court where Rochelle's performing it. It's really hard to be described, so you should just go and see it, experience it for yourself, and then look out for the next episode of our podcast where we'll be interviewing them. Next up, Does My Bomb Look Big in This? Is the name of a new show at Soho Theatre, which is on until June the 8th. So this is Nyla Levy, who is the performer who we saw many episodes ago in Hounslow Girl. She's a really amazing presence on stage, and we can't wait to see this part that she's written for herself in this play, Does My Bomb Look Big in This? Such a funny title. And it's about a schoolgirl in South London whose best friend has left to go to Syria to join the fighting and presumably joining ISIS. She didn't know anything about this, so Aisha is left at home to deal with the fallout from that and to kind of try and understand what was going on in her friend's head that she didn't know about before she left. So it's about a serious topic, but judging by the title, I think it has some humour in it as well. So we're really excited to see Nyla in that. Yvette is coming up at the Bush Theatre until June the 4th. Yvette is about Evie, who's 13. She lives in Neasden with her mum. She wants to tell us about her crush, about her Hello Kitty underwear, about her body hair. She wants to make us laugh, but she's also got something serious to talk about that she's then let out. So it's equal parts hilarious and powerfully moving and award-winning. It mixes spoken word, garage remixes and vibrant original songs to tell the story of a young girl navigating her teens. That is Yvette, which is on at the Bush Theatre until June 4th, but then it's also on at Manchester Royal Exchange. So if you're up north, you can check that out from June the 6th to June the 8th. So if you're in Manchester, that's a recommendation for you. Firecracker is on at Oval House, the very same Oval House where we saw Wondrous Vulva. Firecracker is on June the 6th to June the 8th and looks at the relationship between 16th century Angola and present-day Brazil, featuring a cast of 4 Portuguese-speaking women. And it is set in the refuge of a capoeira group, and it's about discovering legacy and revenge. So that's Firecracker at Oval House, June 6th to June 8th. Sweat is transferring from the Donmar Warehouse to the Gielgud on June 7th until July 20th. This had incredible reception at the Donmar Warehouse. It was nominated for Olivier Award for Best New Play. It's sold out. We couldn't get tickets to it, so we've booked our tickets already to see its West End transfer. Really excited. Lynn Nottage is the writer. Lynette Linton is the director. It's got Claire Perkins in it, who played one of the Emilias in Emilia, if you saw that. So it's like this amazing hot crack team of creatives. It's about friendships of factory workers. It's set in an American bar. It's an American play, and explores the relationships, resentments and fears of a community divided by industrialisation, racial tensions, mounting anger, and a devastating outcome for the residents of Reading, Pennsylvania. So it's set in a real town. And I think Lynn Nottage did lots of research into this town and wanted to really represent the people's lives in it in a very authentic way. So I'm super excited to see that one. You should go see it too. Sweat at the Gielgud, June 7th till July 20th. The next one is a really fun one. It's Fantabulosa, which is a touring outdoor drag show for all the family. And it's touring all the way across England in loads of different locations all summer right until September. And it is a fantastical pop-up world of imagination, storytelling and glitter where boundaries are forgotten and anyone and everyone can be who they want to be. And it's got all the things you'd expect from a drag show, lip syncing, fabulous costumes, original songs, but it's also for all the family. So it's got interactive storytelling, it's got games, it's got dressing up, and it's for everyone of all ages, young and old, who want to experience the joys and freedom of self-expression. So if you've got kids, if you know any kids, if you know someone with kids who you want to take out for a fun drag treat, then you should go to that. Fantabulosa, touring outdoor festivals across England until September. Finally, Kill Climate Deniers at the Pleasance from June 4th till June 28th. This is a daring new satire which asks, what would it actually take to stop climate change dead in its tracks? Cycling, science, recycling, experts, or maybe techno, guns and revolution? This show combines early 90s techno with some performances from a couple of our fave stand-up comics, Felicity Ward and Beck Hill, both Australian comics who are in this. This show did really well when it was in Australia. This is its UK premiere. And we are lucky enough to be holding a post-show audience discussion for this show. So we'll probably be talking a lot about the climate change crisis and what we can do about that. It seems like it will be a fun show, but it's about obviously a hugely important topic, so we probably have a great discussion afterwards. It's June the 8th that we're doing our post-show, but they have loads of post-show things going on. So if you can't make June the 8th, check out all of the stuff on the Pleasance's website, because they've got loads of events happening around this show, and we love a show that has loads of events to celebrate it, so you're not just watching the show, but you're getting to join in the conversation too. So our event is on June the 8th, but the show Kill Climate Deniers is running from June 4th till June 28th. If you come on the night we're doing a post show, you can get a £12 ticket, so best seats for £12 if you use the code Bechdel, all capital letters, BECHDEL 12. Bechdel 12 will get you a discount if you want to come to our post show, Kill Climate Deniers. So that's about all we have for this episode's recommendations. Let us know if you go and see the shows. Let us know if you enjoy them or you don't. Get in touch on Twitter, on Instagram. You can follow us on Facebook and you can email us. We have a new email address, hello@bechdelltheatre.com, and we would love to hear from you if you have any shows you think you should see or we've recommended a show that you loved. That's all for now. Thanks for listening. Bye.